Her title will be sodium phenylbutyrate and Taurursodiol, Amylyx 0035 in ALS patients, and update. Take it away, Machelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to the organizers and all the attendees for the opportunity to speak with you today. And thank you for all of the excellent presentations that have been shared and will be shared. First, I just want to start off by orienting the phrase we use, PB-TURSO, is also a new abbreviation that we've adopted in our publications for AMX 0035. PB-TURSO targets two apoptosis pathways. So I think a lot has been said in the last day or so about the underlying ALS pathophysiology and the complexity and multifactorial nature of all of these complex interactions between the genetic changes that take place, molecular pathways, but all of these result in a neuronal death, which is really the underlying cause for the symptoms and effects seen in ALS. And as it has been brought up, and it was interesting to see in several of the diagrams over the last day or so, the focus on the endoplasmic reticulum and mitochondrial dysfunction, two pathways that have been shown to be central to initiating neuron death in ALS. Certainly, ER stress can cause the unfolded protein response, which if sustained can lead to neuronal death. And then also neuronal death could be directly triggered by the intrinsic apoptotic pathway in the mitochondria. The combination of sodium phenylbutyrate and Taurursodiol, or PB-TURSO, has been proposed to decrease this neuronal death by simultaneously mitigating the ER stress and mitochondrial dysfunction. Specifically, phenylbutyrate is both a chemical chaperone to stabilize protein folding and also has an effect on transcriptional regulators of anti-apoptotic and antioxidant proteins, while TURSO stabilizes the mitochondrial membrane, and this reduces the translocation of BAX, which is a cell death regulator. This leads to improving mito function and also increases the apoptotic threshold of the cell. I want to focus a bit today on our global plans because that's the biggest news that Amylyx has to share with this community. You may have seen in a press release that we have submitted a new drug application to the FDA for PB-TURSO for the treatment of ALS. We are also exploring the possibility for an expanded access program in the US. We will share further information by the end of this year. We also plan to submit a marketing authorization application to the European Medicines Agency at approximately the end of this year. And then earlier in 2021, we filed a new drug submission for AMX 0035 or PB-TURSO to treat ALS. And we filed that with Health Canada in June, and we expect about a 10-month review there. One thing I'll note is that nomenclature across the different geographic regions for TURSO is a bit different. We have elected to call Taurursodiol or ursodeoxycholic TURSO in both cases. And the reason for this is pretty simple. The compound that's generally known as TUDCA or taurursodioxycholic acid had not been registered or regulated as a drug or supplement in the US. So we did have to file for an official name. And so the US Adopted Name Council came back with Taurursodiol, while the international non-proprietary name in Canada and in Europe is ursodeoxycholic. So you may see these used in different regions, but they are interchangeable. And again, we abbreviate both of them as TURSO for simplicity's sake. The regulatory submissions that I just reviewed are all based on the data from the CENTAUR trial. And you may recall that when we started the CENTAUR trial, it was around 2017. And it's really remarkable to see the advancements that have occurred in the field of ALS and clinical trial design since then. And we like to think that we, working with the community, adopted many of the things that were important to patients and caregivers and researchers at the time. In fact, we had a patient and a caregiver each on our steering committee for CENTAUR. Dr. Sabrina Paganoni was the PI, as you probably recall, and we worked closely with Dr. Merit Cudkowicz as well. We allowed participants to stay on their current approved medications for ALS. In fact, 77% were either on riluzole or edaravone in the trial. Participants' recruitment, we use social media and other resources as well. We provided an open label extension in CENTAUR. In fact, there are still a few participants who are still on drug who had participated in the CENTAUR trial. Also, we did not employ a lead-in period prior to the CENTAUR trial and adopted a 6-month randomized phase. And the trial was powered such that statistically significant differences between placebo and active treatment could be seen in a 6-month period. And then the 2-to-1 randomization in favor of Amylyx 0035 was also quite patient-friendly. So we're very grateful for the patients and the researchers who advised us on design of the CENTAUR trial, and that we were able then to use this data to submit to various regulatory authorities. As a reminder of the clinical trial results, they were published in the New England Journal and Muscle and Nerve in 2020. We looked at safety and efficacy were the primary endpoints. Specifically for efficacy, the ALS-FRSR and the difference between placebo and Amylyx 0035 in a shared baseline model. The difference at the end of the 6-month study was 2.32 points. In addition, survival was identified in the statistical analysis plan, and we employed Omnitrace to look at vital status for individuals who had been randomized to the trial, regardless if they finished the trial or dropped out, or whether they were randomized to placebo or to Amylyx 0035. But if you look at the results, the median survival duration for those who started on PB-Terso was 25 months versus those who started on placebo was 18.5 months, for a 6.5-month longer median survival for those who started on Amylyx 0035. And overall, there was a 44% lower risk of death in the group that started on a PB-Terso. From a safety perspective, there were similar rates of adverse events and discontinuations in both the PB-Terso and placebo groups during the 6-month randomized period. GI events did occur with greater frequency in the PB-Terso group, and these events included diarrhea, nausea, salivary hypersecretion, and abdominal discomfort. And they did occur most often in the first 3 weeks during the titration period. Just a plug that we will be presenting at an upcoming conference on the long-term function and safety outcomes from the OLE phase. So post the 6-month randomized period, a number of participants elected to remain in the, or to start into the open label extension phase, either staying on Amylyx 0035 or switching from placebo to active treatment. And so we'll show the long-term function and safety outcomes in a few weeks. Transitioning now and continuing our pathway for ensuring that we are answering questions for people living with ALS and for physicians who are researchers and or may prescribe a product once it's approved or if approved. We are committed to conducting a phase 3 trial. In fact, we are conducting a phase 3 trial globally. That's a global collaboration between NEALS and TRICALS. Our steering committee co-chairs are Drs. Sabrina Paganoni from NEALS and Dr. Leonard Vandenberg from TRICALS. And this Phoenix trial has sites both in Europe and the United States, and I'm happy to report it is now currently underway. Phoenix is designed to evaluate the primary objectives of safety and tolerability of PB-Terso, and also to assess the impact of PB-Terso compared to placebo on both disease progression over 48 weeks, based on the change from baseline of ALS-FRSR and survival. In contrast to CENTAUR, the key inclusion criteria are not only definite ALS, but also clinically probable ALS by the revised Ellis-Goriel criteria. Participants may be within 24 months from initial symptom onset and have an SVC cutoff of at least 55%, and the use of riluzole and or edaravone is permitted. After a screening phase, there will be a randomization of participants in a 3-to-2 ratio to PB-Terso or to placebo, and the randomized phase will continue for 48 weeks. those living with ALS who are eligible for Phoenix will not be eligible for the potential US expanded access program that we are evaluating. So we wanted to make sure that if we were offering any sort of early access in the US through an expanded access program, that it would not interfere with the conduct of the Phoenix study and frankly, the conduct of other ongoing trials. So we've been consulting with both people living with ALS and with clinical researchers for the best way to design a potential US EAP. And hopefully we'll be able to share more information about that shortly. As far as outcomes, the primary efficacy outcome for Phoenix will be a joint assessment of ALS-FRSR total score progression over the 48-week period and survival. Secondary outcomes include SVC, patient-reported outcomes like the ALSEC Q40, EQ5D, and EQ-FAS, the time of transition through King's and mitose stages, time to death, tracheostomy or PAV, and all-cause mortality also beyond the planned 48-week follow-up will be assessed. Safety will include incidence and severity of AEs and serious adverse events, incidence of abnormalities and clinical laboratory assessments, and withdrawal from the trial. In addition, exploratory outcomes do include biomarkers of interest for neurodegeneration and neuroinflammation. We have been able now to make public the locations of the trials. And in fact, on clinicaltrials.gov, there is a listing of the trials. Phoenix will be conducted in, trial sites, excuse me. Phoenix will be conducted in 12 countries and over 70 sites. So including in addition to the United States, which I think most attendees here are from today, Belgium, France, Germany, Ireland, Italy, the Netherlands, United Kingdom, Sweden, Spain, Portugal, and Poland all will have sites. And to be a little more specific, you can see that the US sites are distributed throughout the United States. And many of the sites in the US were also CENTAUR sites, because recall CENTAUR was conducted only in the US at Neil's sites. So we did use some of those same sites, but we've added some additional sites as well. Again, this is available on clinicaltrials.gov, or you can contact me afterward and I can share the link with you. European sites, as I said, included a broad range of 11 European countries, and you can see the listings here. So as we've stated, we are exploring the possibility for an expanded access program in the US. It would run in parallel with both the ongoing phase 3 Phoenix trial and a review of the marketing applications that we've made in Canada, in the US, and potentially in Europe. We will have further information by the end of 2021 on this expanded access program. And we just want to end by saying thank you to all of the participants who were screened and participated in CENTAUR. We're eternally grateful for the participants and their families and the sacrifices that they made. Very thankful for the Neil's collaboration, as well as the new TriCal's collaboration now, as well as NCR and Barrow. The Healy Center, ALS Finding a Cure, ALSA, and IMALS are all also on our list of individuals that were and organizations that we're grateful for. And that's all I have. I'll take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, and congratulations for the entire program, which has been so successful and which is obviously expanding in such an exciting way. There's a question or two in chat. One of them from Christopher Southern is really a little bit more in the genesis of the combination of drugs you're using. What other combinations did you consider in developing this particular pairing of drugs? And what other stoichiometries did you explore before the success of PB-Terso?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that probably a better person to answer that would be our Chief Scientific Officer. However, my understanding is that we did not really explore other combinations. I think this was these two combinations were what we explored. One of our intentions, both in the design of the clinical trial for CENTAUR and Phoenix, is to allow clinically the use of commonly used agents. And then it's something that's of interest, I think, to the entire field, because I've heard already at this meeting and throughout the community, a desire to understand the optimal combination for the treatment of ALS, and understanding the complexity of the disease would probably require, and I think we're beginning to see that, multiple agents. So don't have a great answer for that question, but certainly something we're willing to explore.
Thank you. Thank you. From Jeremy Scheffner, the question is, given the dramatically different inclusion criteria compared to CENTAUR, can you talk about what differences this present trial, the Phoenix trial, is powered to detect?
Sure. I think we're still writing the statistical analysis plan for the Phoenix study, but I think in the efficacy realm, we are looking at specifically ALS-FRSR as the primary efficacy endpoint, along with survival. So when we powered this particular study, the Phoenix study, taking into consideration the longer time since symptom onset and the definite plus probable inclusion for the LS-Scorial, those were all factors taken into consideration from a statistical powering perspective.
Thank you. Thank you. A couple other things. One question has arisen: what about a combination with Riluzole? I guess it would then be a three-way combo.
Yeah, a fixed dose combination, I guess they're talking about.
Yeah.
We have not studied that. Obviously, participants were allowed to be on Riluzole. Yeah. And so we have most of the data that we have is with individuals who are on Riluzole, but that is an interesting concept to think about, a fixed dose combination with all three agents.
Thank you. Just two other questions. Do you think liver is implicated in the pathophysiology of ALS, as TUDCA is used often to treat liver disease?
I'm probably not the best person to ask that. There are far more expert individuals on this call, and I would welcome Bob or others to comment on that. It's an interesting concept, though, just given the mechanism of action.
Yeah. Well, let me then conclude the questions with one of my own, and that is, you have a trial underway now in Alzheimer's disease as well, among other things. Can you comment on its status?
Yes, I can. It's actually completed, and we presented the data at the clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease a few weeks ago in Boston. And so we actually had reported results from a safety perspective, and also it did not meet the endpoint in terms of the cognitive decline indication, but there were a number of biomarker studies that we did and showed biomarker engagement.
Thank you. Very exciting. Much appreciated.